Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Chris Bircher, Director of Technical Services here at CTC. And today we are kicking off a 5-part series on cleaning your projects and maintaining corporate standards in your Revit models. Title's truncated because it's just too long. But before we get going, I want to point out two things. First, at any point during the presentation today, please ask questions using the questions panel. I'll be monitoring that as we go along, and we'll try to answer them in line. If I miss anything or they're asked late, I will clean everything up and answer all questions at the end of the presentation. Second thing is this is being recorded. We'll be on our YouTube channel shortly after the session is over, and you will be able to rewatch it or watch it for the first time when you get the chance. So with that said, let's get going. So this series is about tools of CTCs to clean up your projects and to help institute a standard or your company standard and maintain that throughout the project lifecycle. Tools that come with Revit allow you to do some of this stuff, but it's extremely tedious, extremely it's expensive in time. It takes a lot of maintenance, it's a lot of hands-on work, and you end up doing things that you maybe didn't even need to do, or checking models that you didn't need to check because everything was fine. And you don't know that by looking at it, right? Or just by seeing the file size or anything. You know, someone's got to tell you that it's busted or slow or complaining about it. We can't be proactive and stay on top of it natively. So today, this series is going to highlight tools from across the CTC suites, showing you how we can be proactive, stay on top of things, pinpoint projects that are problem childs or potentially problem childs, and then tools on how to address that, keep things clean, and then ultimately how to help enforce some of those standards and try to do some prevention measures at the end. So this is going to go on for quite some time. So the issues here are that standards are difficult to administer. They're, like I said, they're simple but hard to configure and hard to deploy potentially, depending on what your standard is. And there's nothing to enforce it, right? People can pretty much do whatever they want, and if they know how the tools work. Tracking and maintaining that is non-existent, so we are going to show you some of that, and then finding them and resolving them, right? So we're going to cover all of that throughout the course of these webinars. And we're going to cover all of these tools. We got tools from every single suite on the Revit side of things. So today we're going to focus on what's highlighted here in yellow with Model Compare and Project Snapshot Exporter and Project Activity Logger are the three kind of tools that we're going to look at today. And today's focus is going to be data acquisition and kind of setting that baseline, right? And trying to figure out how to pinpoint the issues or how to track things down and the different methods that go into it. So we're going to get all that covered out and show you what to, and then show you how you can review it, how to extract it, and then kind of maybe potentially even planning a schedule or how to kind of keep tabs on some of these problem child projects, and then how to keep tabs on projects that have the potential to kind of go wonk. So I don't do PowerPoints. That was a lot for me. And now we're just going to jump right in. I'm going to start showing you some of the tools and where everything is and kind of how it's set up. So first off, everything starts in Revit, right? Now, whether in in this case, we have a Revit file. It's just a simple office building. It's got 4 links, and I want to start, maybe someone complained of it taking forever to sync to Central, or I got a warning or an error in Revit that shouldn't have happened, right? Or it crashed for no reason. So at that point, now I've got reason to actually open this file as a BIM manager and start digging in, try to figure out what's going on here. So the first tool I'm going to show you is Model Compare. It's part of the BIM project suite, and Model Compare allows us to take snapshots of the Revit file to determine various things. How many items are in the file, what some of the parameter values are potentially, file size, and some key Revit items. How many families are in the project, how many rooms are placed, how many rooms are not being used, kind of the basics. And you kind of see that those are kind of the common factors that we look for. How many unplaced or unused views are there? How many empty sheets are there? That sort of thing, right? So what we can do is set it up to take snapshots, and you can set up a series of filters to run against your files for said snapshot. Now, the data that we have access to is only limited by what Revit can do for us, right? So effectively, whatever is available in the API is what we have access to. We can tackle it, we can get after it. And we can set it up to take a snapshot of the entire model, or we can filter some things out and get a specific set of criteria put together that is important to us, and that would be something that we'd want to check for. For example, the total view count, and then are those views on sheets or not, or all instances loaded into the model, and how many instances are not placed or not used, right? How many warnings are in the file, and maybe some of the detailed information about that. So you have the option to control which categories of data you're working with. Now, if you're an architect and you guys don't place mechanical equipment, you can remove that from the list. Or if you're a mechanical engineer and you don't place furniture, you can filter that out of your list to make sure that the product doesn't have to scan for things that just won't ever be there. So you have some flexibility here. So if you uncheck a box, and then you can click edit and control what categories are present or what types of data to dig into. And then on top of that, what phase to search in. Do you want to search in the design options? Do you want to search by a specific level? And kind of break it down on that to that point, and really kind of dial it in kind of as much as you want. So did that open on a different monitor? So you have some options here. You can also save these settings. And when the settings are saved, you can load those up at any given time and process them and take a snapshot of a file with the same setup. So if you're always looking for the same thing, regardless of the project file, save those filters, run them again, use them when you need them. And you have the option of just doing it that way. Okay. Why is that not working? At any rate, so what I was going to try to do here is just load up a set of preset filters that I have to do a basic health check. And the way it works is you'll set it up, you run it. There's a couple different ways to run it. I can live just take the snapshot here on my screen, just like this, and it'll process the file that I have open. I also have the ability to schedule it. We have linked Model Compare up to the Windows Task Scheduler tool, so that you can tell Windows when to launch Revit, open a Revit file, and take that snapshot. So if that's something if you did have that problem child Revit file, you could scan and check these things on a weekly basis or a nightly basis if you really were that worried about it. Especially, if it's one of those kind of marquee projects in your office and you really want things to go off without a hitch. I don't, where did that go? All right, well, I'm going to, I broke Revit. Look at that. Okay. Too many things going on, I guess. So at any rate, let's try that again. I'm going to fire this back up. So you have the option to take the snapshot. And all I was going to try to do, again, is just show you the comparison. And there's a couple of different ways to, well, there's only one really way to compare it, but you have some visibility control over what you're trying to compare against. And you know what? While my session's reloading, I'm going to talk about a different thing, and then we'll circle back to the model compare. So model compare, we'll come back to. The second thing we can do here is a service and a feature that we have that comes with a couple of different products. One is Hive. We have a feature in Hive and in the BIM data suite called Project Activity Logger. Now, those are actively looking at the Revit file and extracting bits and pieces of information about that active session on that user's machine. And that's kind of a hands-off sort of thing. So there's not a whole lot you need to do as an administrator to get data back with that one. As long as the service is running and individuals are working on Revit projects and you've got a project defined, and the project definition is really the only piece to the puzzle that you have to manage, you're going to get data. And even without a project defined specifically, you're going to get data. And there's a couple of different ways to review that data. If you're using BIM Data Suite, all of that information is behind your firewall. You need to make sure you have a SQL server in place, whether it's on premises and attached to your physical servers or virtual servers, or it's on an Azure server. But it's yours, right? And it's all kind of part of your internal network. And you can then extract this data. It gets stored into the SQL database. Then you can tie to the SQL database with a product like Power BI, for example, and look at that information in something that's a little bit more friendly on the eyes. So in Power BI, for example, you'd have the ability to get information about the project. So in this case, I have my project list, and I think that's, summary, that's right. So I've got my projects. I know which projects are active, who's using them. I know what my largest Revit files are that are being opened, who's working on them the most, who's putting the most time into Revit. As you can see, Sean is using our projects here with PAL the most. And now we can start getting into some of the data behind it. As far as when is it due, how much time has been put into it, how many models are tied to this particular project, what's the largest model within that file or within that project set. And then if you switch back and forth between projects, you can get different data based off that project. But here's all the goodies, right? How many warnings are in the project? How many groups, levels, how many families are loaded, how many rooms have been placed and then are unenclosed or unplaced and hanging out in the schedule somewhere, confusing people, or unenclosed, or maybe we've got redundant rooms and redundant spaces and things like that. All of that can be tracked down just right here with this one tile. And switching between this and a different Revit file will give you different data based off what you see, right? And different files within said project will have different warnings and different loaded families and different design options and materials. So we have the ability to take a peek at this without ever having to personally open this file. All of our users who are working on the projects, they're the ones that did all the opening and closing of the file. So that's saving me as the bin manager time on having to physically sit there and open each and every thing and manually generate those reports or those schedules and check the warnings to just see what the warning count is, how many links there are, how many what the phasing is, design options, all that fun stuff. Hit purge unused. You know, that kind of a checkup manually can take hours for a Revit file, right? I can do it now in seconds effectively. So saving a ton of time. I get all the sync to central times, file size fluctuation, and you know, if I notice a spike anywhere in this list, maybe something went wrong, right? Maybe the model, someone exploded a CAD file and now it's taking forever to sync to central or to open the file even. Or maybe, you know, so I can start to get a handle on what projects might possibly be the issue just by looking at a model performance tab like this. I can get into a little bit more detail on it if I want and find out which user and which computer had this issue and what their computer specs are potentially, you know, if it's important to you, and then explicit date and times and for when that slowdown happened, and then at the time what was in that file when it happened. So I can really start to nail it down and get access to some of that data. Okay, so and then we have warning summaries and additional user info and Revit versions and all that good stuff. So we can really start to gain access to some of that kind of red flag info that would cause me to see that and say, well, I think I should open that file and see what's going on there. Oh, and here, now the warning types, you can see it gives you the description and all the element IDs that are affected by that error or that warning. So now let me just open this real quick while I talk about another thing. So, well, I have to open the model now. So we had, and just while this is opening, I'm going to hit this question real quick. This report was generated using Project Activity Logger, and in this case for Hive specifically. This is almost the exact same report that you would get using Project Activity Logger for BIM Data Suite. So effectively, whether you have Hive or BIM Data Suite, you can get Project Activity Logger and get this data. This particular one came out of Hive specifically. But it's, like I said, it's the same report either way you look at it. Now, and while that's opening, to kind of continue on from this. So if you're using Hive and Hive PAL or Project Activity Logger for your data, one of the things that we have done recently is given customers, if they want it, access to the API for their data, which allows you to create your own reports and gives you access to more data than what we just show you here in a Power BI file. And that can all begin, or there's a couple of different ways to get a hold of that, right? So you can use the Power BI file here like this and review it in what looks nice and neat. But we also have a couple other ways to extract some of this information. We give you direct access to the API using a reports key, and that reports key can be utilized in different places. Oh, great, now it popped up. Postman is a API reporting system, web-based, that allows you access to your Hive and project data. Now, there's more than just project data here because Hive has more than just project analytics. So we do have information about the accounts and the content management system and the cloud shared licensing and app usage and stuff like that if you choose to. We also have all the project data here as well. And this allows you to get familiar with what we're extracting and how it's being reported so that you can do more with it. And you can extract the data from here as well if you choose to. So if I hit send on this particular report, this is going to get me doc session records for an organization. And this just shows me basically all the project data or the project level information. So I know where the file's coming from. I know who opened it last and who's, what org it's from, which is always going to be my org, and, sync to central information and various pieces like that. I can take this data, export it out to a JSON from here, link it into a Power BI or Tableau or SQL or various other avenues of analytics, and kind of stitch some of these tables together to review some data. If you have that ability, right? If you've got people that can mess with some of this data, you can create your own custom reports and tailor this to meet your needs and not just what we've provided. We give you a nice little starting point, but there's going to be things that you guys want to do with it on your own. So if you're interested in getting access to some of this extra data and you've got Hive and you're using Project Activity Logger, we can help you get this set up. So I just wanted to point that out because this is kind of a newer thing that we've got going on, and which a lot of people have asked for. So here it is. You have access to it. You can get your project information here and, just about everything that you need. So yeah. So now that I'm back here with Model Compare, what I wanted to show you is, so we took the snapshot, okay? And I've taken a couple of them. I've been, let's say I've been running a schedule on this model once a week on a Wednesday. There's been a few, I got the complaint. Now I need to compare the snapshots. So I can actually take the comparison option within Model Compare and create a new comparison, or open an existing one if I had one. And I can pick a couple of different files that were used in a snapshot and put those together to see what's the problem. So I've got a few snapshots here to look at. So I'm going to grab, let's see, let's do this one. No, let's not. Let's do this one and this one. Now, if you've done variations on the snapshots and you didn't do the best job about trying to name them, if the filters were different, the tool will tell you, and that way you can figure out which snapshot, or you can basically compare the filter settings used to kind of try to determine which one you used at that moment in time, or which job that came from, or which scheduled task. And if you need them to be the same, you can go back, find a different one until you get the right one, or pick from the right folder, or just reprocess it. It's not the end of the world. You can still compare the setups if you'd like. And it's going to show you everything that was used. And you have the ability now to control, what do I want to see? Do I want to see this? Do I want to see that? It's entirely up to you how you want to put that together. And I'm just going to hit OK. And it's going to now stitch together my report. Now, this is a report in Model Compare. So it's very much it's not very graphical. We've got some filters in there, or some color coding of some of the data in there, so you can kind of tell what's what. There's definitely, it's not like Power BI where you've got a bunch of charts, but it's, many of us already have BIM Project Suite, which means you have Model Compare, which means you can do this today and take a snapshot of, or take a couple snapshots of a particular project file at different stages and compare them together and see what the differences are. So you do have some options there. once it opens. Here we go again. I'm going to hit the question that just popped up that goes back to PAL. We have Hive PAL, but I can only see the PAL analytics on the CTC web portal. I don't see an option to export it to Excel. So I will show you. So with Hive PAL, if you've got Hive PAL, we have our dashboard on the website that you have access to. It's very much like the Power BI file that you also get. All of the data, if you wanted to put together a different Power BI file for it, not based off the API, is right here. On the dashboard, under downloads, you should have access to these 4 buttons for the Power BI template that I showed you, and access to the Hive CMS, PAL, and user and group data. And you have to click the email button and it will email you the Excel file report. So click the button, look for the email. It'll take a little bit depending on how much data you have. If you want to look at it the other way where I showed you with Postman and then linking Postman into a Power BI, reach out to us and we can help you get access to your report, your API keys, so that you can stitch that together. And there was a previous webinar done on that by Sean a few weeks back that I recommend you watch if you're interested in that part of it. All right, well, I guess I need to not, I guess this file was too much for this project. So the other piece that I was gonna mention, which is very similar to Model Compare actually, is the snapshot exporter. And that effectively does the exact same thing as Model Compare. The major difference there is that it exports behind your to your SQL server behind your firewall, just like the project activity logger does for Data Suite, right? It's got its own set of tables in your database, separate from PAL, so you can kind of keep them separate from each other. It has a separate Power BI file that you can reference for some of the snapshots and to compare data back and forth. And you get a lot of the similar data to control. I broke my Power BI file, so I can't show it to you, unfortunately. I don't know what I did this morning, but now I can't do it. But effectively, you're getting the same exact thing that we have here, and you have the ability to snapshot or to take a snapshot, even with the same filters if you'd like, if you set them up in Model Compare first, same set of snapshots, and compare them together. And then if you've got the SQL server and you've got a SQL database administrator, you can create additional tables and queries and build out some unique reports that, again, are important to you guys that maybe we haven't provided out of the box, which gives you the opportunity to stitch together your own custom Power BI file. Or instead of Power BI, maybe use Tableau. Or maybe you guys are using Domo, another data viz tool. Super cool and powerful, by the way. I should just throw that out there. But that gives you the ability to kind of do your own thing and get the data that's important to you. So, gosh, I wish that would open. I want to show it to you. At any rate, the good stuff, in my opinion, is being able to see it visually like this. Now, you can take your Model Compare files or your snapshot files and stitch them all together in a way that is visual like this. If you've taken snapshots using Model Compare and now you've got Data Suite, you can actually take those Model Compare files and import them in using Data Suite and push those into your SQL database to then be viewed here in a Power BI format or in Tableau or whatever other format you guys are choosing to use. Okay. Well, I pissed off this file today, so. So let's see here. I want to show you a little bit more about the web interface here that we have. So I didn't spend much time on this because we have the API access, but using Postman and then stitching that into the Power BI file. But maybe that's a lot for you and you don't really want to go that route. Maybe that seems too complicated, or you just want to see on the surface right out of the gate what you have. As part of the CTC portal, when you sign in, if you've got Hive and you can set up your project analytics here and build the project, give it the name, the number, and the appropriate file paths associated to that project. And when you get the project activity logger service installed on your machine, it's going to start extracting the data from the Revit models as it's being used. And it's compiling that here in your portal, in your data dashboards. So from the dashboard tab here, you'll have access to enterprise level info and then project specific info. And if you've been using the CMS or the content management tool, you'll have search stats and other data here as well. But you'll have, some basic overall enterprise type level information about how many users you got, if you're using Hive, how many libraries you have, how many projects you're working with, Revit versions and add-ins installed and being used. It's always nice to kind of know that. And then all your project data. So it's exactly what I was showing you in Power BI, but in the web portal. So you don't even need to know how to use Power BI. Power BI is free, which is why we chose it, but it gives you all the same information up here as well. So maybe this is the place to start. Or this is just the place you end up because you don't have the time or the energy or the, to kind of try to work with some of this other stuff. But this is all the same data, which is really nice. And because it's already there, you don't have to do anything to get it other than set the project up. And project setup is super simple. So thankfully, yeah, that's right. Okay. So, but you get the idea. So at this time, since my Revit is being a pill today, I am just gonna open it up for questions, for any other questions that may have arisen during this discussion. And, oh, great, of course. I don't know when I closed that. So, yeah, I don't know what I wish I knew what I did to my Revit file to make that happen. But yeah, so if you got any questions, feel free to ask them right now. Otherwise, I appreciate everybody for joining me today. And I look forward to seeing you next week when we get into the other tools to start with some of the cleanup process. And those tools specifically are gonna be the project cleaner and type swapper and I believe schedule parameter resolver, if I remember correctly. And we're gonna show you how we can take we're gonna identify some stuff from our Power BI files and utilize those tools to clean up some stuff and continue on down the path of working with all the other tools. All right, I'm not seeing any additional questions come in. So I want to thank you all again for your time today. Appreciate you all, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Take care, everybody.